Picture a nation where brothers point rifles at each other across muddy fields, where mothers write final letters to sons who will never return home. This is America, 1861, a country tearing itself apart. You think you understand civil war? Imagine your neighbor becoming your enemy overnight. Your childhood friend now wears a different uniform. Your own blood choosing opposite sides. This wasn't just politics, this was family destruction. In Charleston Harbor, cannons roar at Fort Sumter. The first shots echo across a continent. But the real war began decades earlier, in cotton fields, congressional halls, and human hearts poisoned by an unforgivable sin. They called it the peculiar institution, as if slavery were merely odd, not monstrous. 4 million souls in chains. Their labor built American prosperity. Their freedom would demand American blood. The reckoning had finally arrived. Meet Eli Whitney. His cotton gin, invented in 1793, was supposed to reduce slavery's need. Instead, it made cotton king and chains more profitable. Innovation serving evil, technology's dark promise fulfilled. The South produced wealth. The North produced factories. 2 economic systems, 2 worldviews, 1 impossible union. Cotton financed northern mills, while enslaved hands picked every fiber. The hypocrisy wrapped in economic necessity. In 1820, Missouri wanted statehood as a slave state. Congress trembled. The Missouri Compromise drew an invisible line across America's map. Below it, slavery. Above it, freedom. Geography became destiny. Henry Clay earned the nickname Great Compromiser. He spent decades stitching together a nation constantly threatening to unravel. But can you compromise with evil forever? Can democracy negotiate with its own conscience indefinitely? 1850 brought California's gold and another crisis. Should new territories embrace slavery or freedom? The Compromise of 1850 temporarily silenced the guns. Temporarily. Some wounds refused to heal. Harriet Beecher Stowe never owned slaves, never lived in the South. Yet her pen became a weapon sharper than any sword. Uncle Tom's Cabin sold millions of copies, converting hearts, hardening resolve nationwide. Frederick Douglass escaped bondage to become America's conscience. His voice thundered from lecture halls. What to the slave is your 4th of July? Freedom's hypocrisy exposed in elegant, devastating prose that shamed a nation. Kansas bleed first. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers flooded the territory, bringing violence. Bleeding Kansas became America's dress rehearsal for civil war. Democracy drowning in its own contradictions, neighbor murdering neighbor. John Brown believed God called him to end slavery through violence. At Harper's Ferry, he tried to arm enslaved people for rebellion. Captured, hanged, martyred. His body moldered, his truth kept marching. The Supreme Court delivered the Dred Scott decision in 1857. Black people, the judges ruled, could never be American citizens. The Constitution itself seemed to embrace white supremacy forever. Abraham Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist when elected president. He simply wanted to contain slavery's spread, not end it entirely. But sometimes history chooses leaders for purposes they never originally imagined. South Carolina seceded 3 days after Christmas, 1860. Then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas. The United States of America began dissolving like sugar in rain. Union became memory. Jefferson Davis became president of a new nation, built explicitly on racial oppression. The Confederate States of America declared white supremacy as their cornerstone. No apologies, no euphemisms, naked, proud evil. Fort Sumter sat in Charleston Harbor like a Union fist in Confederate territory. Major Robert Anderson commanded 85 men. Confederate General Pierre Beauregard demanded surrender. Anderson refused. Cannon spoke instead of diplomacy. April 12, 1861, 4:30 in the morning. Confederate artillery opened fire on Fort Sumter. 34 hours of bombardment. No deaths, but a nation died anyway, reborn through violence. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina joined the Confederacy. Families split apart. Brothers would soon meet on battlefields as enemies. Bull Run shattered illusions. Both sides expected quick victory, glory, homecoming parades. Instead, 1861's first major battle revealed war's true face: chaos, terror, death, and humiliating retreat through mud. George McClellan commanded the Union Army like a perfectionist sculptor, always preparing, never finishing. He had soldiers, supplies, advantages. What he lacked was killer instinct. Lincoln grew impatient, watching opportunities waste away. Robert E. Lee faced the war's cruelest choice. Offered command of Union forces, he chose Virginia over country. Honor versus Union, a Southern gentleman's impossible dilemma that defined regional loyalty forever. The Peninsula Campaign promised to capture Richmond quickly, end rebellion efficiently. Instead, McClellan's caution allowed Lee's brilliance to shine. 7 days' battles saved the Confederate capital and extended America's agony indefinitely. Antietam Creek ran red with 17,000 casualties in a single day, September 17, 1862, America's bloodiest day. Lee retreated, but McClellan failed to pursue. Victory slipped through hesitant fingers again. Lincoln had waited for military success to free the slaves. Antietam provided barely enough justification. The Emancipation Proclamation transformed Civil War into moral crusade. Freedom became America's weapon and destination. Only enslaved people in rebellious states gained freedom through Lincoln's proclamation. Border state slaves remained in bondage. Strategic liberation, not moral absolution. Even righteous causes require political calculation and compromise. Frederick Douglass met Lincoln in the White House. Two self-made men, one born in a log cabin, one in slave quarters, debating freedom's meaning. Douglass pushed the president toward full equality, justice. The 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment proved black soldiers could fight with extraordinary courage. At Fort Wagner, they charged Confederate earthworks knowing death awaited. Valor earned through bloodshed, respect through sacrifice. Gettysburg, July 1863. Lee invaded Pennsylvania, seeking decisive victory on Northern soil. 3 days, 51,000 casualties. Pickett's charge failed. The Confederacy reached its high water mark and began receding. Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes at Gettysburg Cemetery dedication. The Gettysburg Address redefined America's purpose: government of the people, by the people, for the people. Democracy's meaning clarified through war's crucible. Vicksburg controlled the Mississippi River. Ulysses Grant besieged the city for 47 days. Citizens ate rats to survive. When Vicksburg surrendered, the Confederacy split in half. Geography became military destiny. Grant understood war's arithmetic. The Union had more men, more resources, more industrial capacity. Attrition would eventually triumph over tactical brilliance. He prepared to grind the Confederacy into bloody dust. The Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, names that became synonyms for slaughter. Grant lost 60,000 men in 6 weeks. But unlike previous Union commanders, he never retreated. Forward motion despite horrific casualties. William Tecumseh Sherman believed war should be terrible enough to prevent future wars. His march through Georgia targeted civilian infrastructure, morale, hope itself. War is hell, he declared while creating hellscape. Atlanta burned. Sherman's men destroyed everything of military value, then kept destroying. Railroads twisted into Sherman's neckties. Factories became ashes. The Confederacy's industrial heart stopped beating through deliberate economic warfare. From Atlanta to Savannah, Sherman's army carved a 60-mile-wide path of destruction. They liberated enslaved people while devastating landscapes. Liberation and devastation walked hand in hand through Georgia's ruined countryside. Philip Sheridan turned Virginia's Shenandoah Valley into wasteland. A crow flying over it would have to carry provisions, he boasted. The Union Army had learned to wage total war against civilian populations. Lee's army starved while defending Petersburg. Soldiers deserted nightly. The Confederate currency became worthless paper. An entire nation slowly bled to death while its leaders refused to acknowledge reality's verdict. April 9, 1865, Appomattox Courthouse. Lee surrendered to Grant in Wilmer McLean's parlor. The war that began in McLean's Manassas home ended in his new Virginia residence. History's ironic bookends. Grant offered generous terms. Confederate soldiers could keep horses, sidearms, return home unmolested. No treason trials, no executions, no revenge. Magnanimity and victory, perhaps America's finest moment during its darkest period. John Wilkes Booth believed he could resurrect the Confederacy through assassination. At Ford's Theater, he murdered Lincoln 5 days after Lee's surrender. Victory became tragedy. Healing became hatred in seconds. Andrew Johnson inherited the presidency and Reconstruction's challenges. A Southern Democrat leading Northern Republicans through the aftermath of Civil War. The wrong man at the wrong time, facing impossible circumstances. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery nationwide. The 14th granted citizenship to former enslaved people. The 15th prohibited voting restrictions based on race. Constitution rewritten to embrace equality theoretically. Freedmen's Bureau provided education, medical care, legal assistance to former enslaved people. Schools arose where none existed before. Literacy became freedom's foundation. Knowledge threatened those who preferred oppression to equality. 40 acres and a mule, the promise made to freed slaves. Economic independence would secure political freedom. But Andrew Johnson reversed land redistribution policies. Freedom without property became freedom without power. The Ku Klux Klan rose like a monster from defeat's ashes. Night riders terrorized black families, burned schools, murdered Republican politicians. White supremacy reorganized itself as guerrilla warfare against democracy. Hiram Revels became the first black United States senator, representing Mississippi in 1870. He occupied Jefferson Davis's former seat. The Confederacy's president replaced by a man born into slavery, Justice's poetry. Radical Republicans impeached Andrew Johnson for obstructing Reconstruction policies. He survived conviction by one vote. Presidential power balanced against congressional will. Democracy's machinery tested under extreme stress, but ultimately functioning. The Compromise of 1877 ended Reconstruction in exchange for a Republican presidency. Federal troops withdrew from the South. Black Americans abandoned to local white supremacists. Freedom sacrificed for political convenience. Jim Crow laws replaced slavery's chains with legal segregation. A separate but equal became the lie that governed Southern society for nearly a century. Apartheid with American characteristics, injustice through legislative creativity. Sharecropping trapped former enslaved people in economic bondage barely distinguishable from slavery. They worked land they could never own for debts they could never repay. Freedom became another word for exploitation. The industrial North boomed while the agricultural South struggled to rebuild. Railroads connected markets, factories multiplied production, cities swelled with immigrants. War had accelerated America's transformation into an industrial powerhouse. Confederate monuments rose decades after the war ended, during Jim Crow's establishment and civil rights movement's emergence. Stone soldiers stood guard over white supremacy's persistence. History weaponized to justify continued oppression. Buffalo Soldiers, black troops who fought Native Americans in the West, served a nation that denied them basic citizenship rights. Military service couldn't purchase equality. Patriotism remained unrequited love for many. The Civil War claimed over 600,000 American lives, more than all other American wars combined until Vietnam. Every family mourned. Every community erected monuments. Death became the nation's shared experience. Walt Whitman nursed wounded soldiers in Washington hospitals. He saw democracy's cost measured in severed limbs, infected wounds, dying boys calling for mothers. Poetry couldn't heal trauma, but might preserve memory. Gettysburg National Cemetery contains over 3,000 graves, Union soldiers from 18 states. Confederate dead were buried elsewhere, in unmarked plots. Even in death, division persisted through geographical and memorial separation. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, connected Atlantic and Pacific coasts. Chinese and Irish immigrants hammered America together with steel rails. Unity achieved through immigrant labor and industrial ambition. Susan B. Anthony argued that if black men could vote, so should all women. The 15th Amendment's passage inspired suffragists while frustrating them. Freedom's expansion created new demands for equality. By 1877, America had survived its greatest existential crisis. Union preserved, slavery abolished, Constitution amended. But equality remained more aspiration than reality for millions of citizens still fighting for freedom. You've witnessed a nation's near death and difficult rebirth. The Civil War ended slavery but couldn't end racism. It preserved union but couldn't guarantee justice. Victory remained incomplete. Freedom still required vigilance. The Civil War's consequences echo through every American generation. Every civil rights struggle, every debate about federal versus state power, every question about who belongs in democracy traces back to 1861. Lincoln's new birth of freedom remains perpetually unborn, constantly struggling toward delivery. Each generation must choose whether to expand liberty or restrict it. The Civil War never truly ended, it just changed battlefields. Walk through any American city. You're walking through Civil War consequences, integrated schools, voting rights, federal power, constitutional amendments. That war shaped the nation you inhabit. Its legacy remains your inheritance and responsibility.